thank you all so much for coming today. To introduce myself, I'm John Feary. I'm a co-founder of mWater. We started this organization 13 years ago now, almost 14 if you can believe that. It's been a really great, 14 years, and this conference has always played a role in our development over the years, and it's kind of nice to be back here full circle now. In this new world that we're in, where we are needing to do more with less. I think we can all agree that one outcome of the past 6 months, 10 months now, it's been like, it feels like 10 years, is that we need to be able to do more with less, and we need to scale our solutions more effectively. So today, what we're going to be talking about is digitalization and data-driven development. And I'll tell you a little bit about what we think that is, but it's not so important what we think. We really want to share with you the perspectives of people that are out there doing this in their programs, in the real world, and that's going to be the focus of the session. So we're going to have some great presenters representing the breadth of the WASH sector, from NGOs, to innovative finance, to donors, and all of these presenters have been longtime friends of ours and colleagues, and it's been really great to grow together. So the co-conveners today are Catholic Relief Services. I think. Test. Sorry.
Testing.
And allow me to introduce Susan Lamb, our program manager, who's also able to solve many problems on a moment's notice. Thank you. Okay, I like this better. Yeah. So our co-conveners are World Vision, Catholic Relief Services, Azure, and Osprey Foundation. So to begin with our agenda today, I'll give you a brief presentation. If you want to know more about mWater, if you don't know much about us, I'm just going to give you a brief spiel. It won't be a lot, and I'll try to give you some ideas that we have on how we can enhance digitalization and cooperation around data in the sector, and maybe some sneak peeks of new features that are coming soon. And then we'll get into our panelists. We'll have presentations by each, and then we'll have a big discussion and answer question, because I think you guys are going to have lots of questions, and the online participants always do as well. And we welcome everybody from around the world who's listening. Thanks for joining us. So about mWater, if you don't know about us already, we are a digital public good serving the water and sanitation sector. We also have grown over the years to have sister brands called Solstice and Juno. Solstice is focused on integrated development of all the different sectors. We realize that having water in your name is sometimes difficult for the health or the environment or the education sectors to get on board with. So Solstice is exactly the same platform, but different branding. And most recently, Juno, which is going to be focused on environmental monitoring, which is a growth of ours, a growth area for us. And we have grown over these 14 years to have 350,000 users almost in 198 countries and territories. These users, 99% of them have no relationship to us. They are free users. They just find out about the platform through somebody. They sign up. They use the platform for free. And hopefully, some of them become partners. And what funds the platform is the investments by our partners who engage us to do data-driven programming and development work, to develop new features in the platform that are coming out all the time, and also to help us advance kind of the state of knowledge of water and sanitation service delivery. As a result of our interactions with these partners and with all the free users that teach us a lot about what's going on in the WASH sector and how work is being done, we've grown to have an expertise in data management and data-driven approaches to development. So one of the things that I always say about this is it's more than the technology. We are more than technology, although we provide this amazing platform that gets 40,000 images submitted per day. We're about to reach our 40 millionth survey submission, which is really exciting. We have tens of thousands of users every single day submitting things. But the technology is the visible part, but the part that makes digitalization actually happen is under the surface. So that's why I love this analogy of the iceberg. If you're familiar with icebergs in the Arctic, the analogy is that the part you see is very small and the part underneath is really big. And that's true in almost every organization that we've worked with, from government to utilities to NGOs. Everywhere that we've worked, we've found that the people and the processes are the most challenging part to the digitalization journey. You have to develop the capacity of people. You have to have systems for transferring knowledge because there's a lot of turnover in the government and the utility sector. You need systems in place to capture knowledge and transfer it and share it. You need your processes to be aligned with your systems. So if you have a bunch of processes that are still taking place on paper, those have to be slowly brought into the digital domain. And that's a big challenge. It's not just a challenge in low resource contexts around the world. It's a challenge for giant utilities in the United States. They're all going through very similar journeys. And how do we harness the power of digitalization and also be able to still do the work that we have to do to get services delivered? So over the years, we've grown to be more than just software. We provide technical assistance to large programs, sector monitoring efforts. We have quite a lot of experience now in monitoring from the district or the county level on up to the national and everything in between. We have grown a lot in providing data services and data platforms for service providers and utilities. We're really, our systems could work for large utilities in big cities, but we find that the real need is with the small utilities that are growing, that will eventually become the cities and towns' water supplies in the future as they transition from point sources to pipe systems. So we have a lot of focus on that. And lastly, we develop innovative programs and projects, including things like results-based approaches, sensor integration, data fusion, and building on satellite and GIS, geospatial data sets. So when we started out in this journey, I think a lot of people had this vision of the water supply sector. It was like rural point sources where people wait in line to queue up for water and take it back to their homes. And you've seen a lot of the sector built around this model and sustaining it and trying to make it more sustainable, which is important. What we have grown to become most focused on is the professionalization of those services. So our vision for the future is about piped water for all. That's in the policies of most countries of the world, including low resource, middle income, and high income countries, to achieve piped water services for their citizens. It's what we have the benefit of receiving here. And the way that happens is by professionals doing their work and having it recorded and monitored and incentivized and having their performance monitored and improved over time. So we went on this journey with a lot of different utilities that we worked with. We had the benefit of some USAID programs, that many of us have worked on to bring this into countries and work directly with utilities. We have worked with NGO partners, and we've worked directly with service providers in some cases when we have our own programs. And what we realized is that it wasn't that data should be collected after the service is delivered to understand how the service quality is. That's important, and that's what national monitoring systems are set out to do. But we realized that if we could harness the primary data production of the service provider, then it turns the monitoring into an observation rather than a separate effort to go out and collect data. So what we are trying to do with our tools for service providers is we've done a lot of research into this. We realize not only do service providers in low resource contexts not have data systems for their customer database and their meter readings and their accounting, often they don't have the data, period. So they're operating services in a very resource-strained environment, and it's hard for them to recover costs when they don't know who their customers are and what their service levels are. So what we have focused on with this, this tool set for service providers is give them some starting tools. Maybe they'll grow eventually into using really advanced tools that are beyond what we're able to provide. But we try to provide a really good set of basic tools as well as global standards that power those. So for example, our asset management standard was developed to work for low resource contexts just as well as high resource. To us, it makes no difference because the same assets have to be monitored in the same way. Okay, so last, I'm not going to talk all day about mWater. I want to bring up our panelists soon. I'll just give you a little sneak peek because we've been doing some really exciting work. Fortunately, in the tumult that we've gone through in the last year or so with the destruction of USAID and the reprogramming of budgets, a lot of our long-term partners and supporters have come through and provided us with an opportunity to develop some new things that we've been wanting to build for a long time. So we're really excited to be on the cusp of releasing some new features. The one that we're most excited about is workflows. So many of you may be familiar with filling out forms and monitoring. What workflows does is allow you to develop your entire process in a digital format. So for example, when a report comes in from a customer about a water point being down, it can automatically assign a technician to go do the diagnosis, fill out some basic information. It can then, assign the technical team to go out and do a service visit. And then after that's been completed, then we can have, say, the asset owner or the regulator verify that the work has been done, the system is working again. And all those can be done by different people in different steps. And so we're trying to take what's happening in the real world, put it into the digital world in a way that lets everybody in the field have at their fingertips what's been going on with this water point or this water system, and quickly get to the next step that they're supposed to do. Another thing that's coming is the integrator. We have a lot of interest among people who have sensors or water ATMs or other kind of innovative technology systems, and they want to bring that data into the same environment where they have their asset registry and other data. So the integrator is going to help you be able to do that more easily. It will connect automatically to certain data sources. Over time, we'll build a library of connections to the different types of sensors and things that exist out there. It also provides a way to easily export data from the platform. Something that's really important to us is that we don't make you feel locked into our platform. We want you to become digital and use data to scale your services and your program models. And part of that is feeling safe with your data in a platform, knowing that you can get it out. And that's really important to governments. So this is key to us being able to integrate with other data systems. Government data systems often are the official system of record that have to have the final information, but we can provide that data more easily if we have these open API connections. And last but not least, I'm sure it wouldn't be a technology presentation without talking about AI. We are thinking about practical ways to integrate AI into the platform without being gimmicky. And some of those ideas revolve around making it easier to build data visualizations, easier to find the type of workflow or survey One of the great things about workflows and surveys is they go into a library. If you want to share them, anybody else can use your workflow to reproduce the way that you collect data or perform a process. So we think that AI can help a lot with that. It's already helped actually by translating our portal to more than, I think, 13 languages, just by the virtue of AI being able to do pretty good language translation. But we think it can do a lot more than that, obviously. And we would be remiss as a technology company to not be thinking about how to integrate AI into what we do. So those are some coming attractions, I guess is what I'll say. And for now, I'm going to leave it at that, and I think I'm going to take it away from mWater. And what we want to do next is provide you with some perspectives on some really long-term friends of ours and users and supporters of data-driven management across the sector. These organizations have put data, taken data from an add-on and put it in front of the program, making it the point of their operations. So with that, I'm going to introduce the panel one by one, so they'll come up and give their presentations, and then we'll come all up here for questions at the end, if that's all right, because we want to be efficient with time. So the first person I'm going to introduce is Paul Hicks from Catholic Relief Services in Azure. He has worked around the world. Yeah, go ahead and switch. Thank you. He's worked around the world in a lot of really interesting countries, including Afghanistan, El Salvador, where he most recently worked. He was the co-founder and technical lead of Azure Source Capital initiative that's mobilized $20 million for in loan capital for water service operators in Central America. And more recently, he was involved in the Somos Rio Lempos program, LEMPA program in El Salvador, which is an innovative finance vehicle for watershed rehabilitation and watershed level impact. So really exciting to have he's going to bring the financial and private sector angle to this, and he's going to share a little bit more after this. So thank you. There you go.
Hi, everyone. Thanks. A couple of anecdotes. About 9 years ago, I was in a conference like this and saw when mWater was just getting off the ground and sharing the tools, and I was fascinated by it. And I talked to John and Annie, who were the co-founders, and as they're getting, and we talked kind of deeply what we could be doing with this new initiative that we were starting, sort of transitioning from a long-term traditional water and sanitation program into what is now the Azure Source Capital program. And we had great conversations, and then we went back to El Salvador, and there was a local group that was getting off the ground doing something similar. So then I saw John again in another meeting, and I said, hey, we decided to go with a local because we wanted to keep it local. And John said, great, when that doesn't work, reach out to us again. And so about a year later, or 6 months later, I reached out to John again saying, it didn't work, could you help us? And so we started right at the start of designing this program. It was bringing in mWater and co-designing something. And somebody from the Ministry of Water of Ethiopia was sharing an analogy of data management, and he referred to it as the honeycomb and the honey. And so the honeycomb being your platform and the honey being the data. So I'm here to explain how mWater is honey. Azure was an initiative that we designed. We are finishing a long-term water program in Central America. I was working in 4 countries in Central America. And we had a lot of data, a lot of information around small-scale water service providers, thousands of them. In El Salvador alone, 2,400, in Honduras, 8,000, and then others throughout. And there has not been large-scale water and sanitation programs in Central America funded by the U.S. government, USAID, or others in a very long time. And so the question was, what do all these thousands of small-scale water service providers do to improve their systems? So we did a survey, and we estimated that about 2/3 of them needed serious capital, and they all needed technical services. And so how do we do this? And so we started exploring, and there's a whole history of it, of how we came to this. But ultimately, we designed a business model on how we would go about providing technical services and mobilizing capital for water service providers. And so they invited me to be here as the private sector representative on this panel, and I loved it because it has been sort of a business thinking approach about how we do this, and really becoming literate and versatile in how we're approaching all of this from a business perspective, and understanding that our clients in all of this, water service providers, are for the most part social enterprises. In some cases they're actually businesses, but we're working in a whole ecosystem of businesses, and so how do we operate with them? So I just want to read the value proposition here, and it is to mobilize technical support and funding from multiple sources to support local governments, water service providers, and community organizations to expand and improve water and sanitation services and protect their water sources. And we went through a whole business planning approach and to really refine this value proposition. We defined this about 10 years ago, and through all this iteration, learning and adjusting, the value proposition has held, and saying this is still this element that we're focusing on and figuring out how to do it better. So the model is that every water or sanitation system has unique and different opportunities to be able to solve it by mobilizing technical services and financial capital. And so this list here is sort of an example of potential sources of funding to be able to fund improvements to a water system or sanitation services. Community funds, national and municipal funds, NGOs, donors, overseas development assistance, development banks, local banks, impact investors, private sector, and there can be more that you all know very well. And so the trick here is in here, how do you kind of play a broker role, or a real kind of a development entrepreneur role, to bring together these different sources of funding and technical support to be able to solve the problem, the specific problem that you're trying to achieve, and then the outcomes, improved water services, improved sanitation services, and source water protection. So that's essentially what the innovation of Azure is. And that if you don't have project money, if you're not implementing a project with donor funds, with specific targets or something, this is essentially what our model and what our innovation is. I'm sorry, I've skipped over a bit, but I kind of want to rush ahead and sort of explaining our relationship with mWater. But starting in 2017, 18, and then formally 2019, we set up Azure Source Capital. And so it's an LLC based in the United States that has $20 million of funding committed that goes into this fund, Azure Source Capital. And then Azure Source Capital takes its money and it allocates it to trust funds in El Salvador, Honduras, and soon Guatemala. And those trust funds then loan money to financial institutions or directly to water service providers and other entities within a water and sanitation ecosystem, which I can explain later. So the investors, or CRS and BEAD or IDB, are the equity investors, and then another partner who is also a minority equity holder. And then the senior debt is, you see all the logos there, and there are more coming in, all of whom have allocated or loaning money into Azure Source Capital and get repaid interest on the money that they put in. So this fund will generate revenue for those debt investors, and over time also the equity investors. A critical piece and in my estimation, the most important piece is the technical services or the technical support. So it's the teams and partners that are working with water service providers to analyze their problems, come up with solutions, and then make sure that all the funding, all the different channels of funding that we're using, including loan funds, is being used effectively to get the results that we need. And so what are those results? So here's an example of a funding. We call it braided funding from multiple sources to improve water services. So this is a specific project in El Salvador that benefited 200 households or so. And so the braided funding is this, is that we have a grant fund from a sugar cane company that's wanting to support the well-being of the communities around where they work. This is a loan. Our Fide Agua is our trust associated with Azure Source Capital in El Salvador. So they provided that to the water service provider. And then the municipal office also took a loan from Fide Agua. And then we had grant money from a different project that paid for the technical services and the engineering. And then the community also organizing. So it's a more than $100,000, and it's funding from multiple sources. So that's how the model works. And then the question is, how do we monitor the results? Because now we have investors, and the investors are in this not so much for the economic return. They definitely want to see, they don't want to lose money on this. But really the reason that they're doing it, and the reason that they're doing it at sort of relatively low interest rates, is that they want to see the social impact. And so if we can demonstrate the social impact, that's sort of the first leverage, and then say, okay, great, that's why we're in this. We want to see a social impact. And we also want to see kind of the financial model is also working, and that we will get repaid. And so this is where we started working with mWater from the start. And so even suggestions on indicators, and who else are they working with, what kind of indicators are they using, and how can we be doing that? And then setting this up in a way that can be presented to other people so that's very well understood. We've been working closely with Osprey on different things, and Susan for many years. And Susan really gets into these things. So Susan sometimes asks me questions that I'm not even aware of, and because she's looking at our database and asking hard questions because this data is available in a way that's very easily understood. And so all of our data is actually on the mWater platform. So a bit of a correction. We've mobilized $21 million, and a portion of that, $12 million of that has been loan capital. And then the rest of it is co-funding for other grant money for projects, but also for technical services, et cetera. It's on the mWater site, so anybody can go in and see that data. With mWater and with others, we developed an A to D system that's based on a series of indicators at looking at overall the quality of a water service provider, the services that they provide, and also their own organizational capacity and financial capacity. And so each of them is rated on an A to D system. So we can say our baseline, when we come in, they're at a D. Our goal is to get them to a C or a B over a period of time. And in almost all cases, the engagement with them is long-term, because you can really focus with them early on interventions that you can afford to do in the midterm, in the short and midterm, to be able to improve their services and move them up that ladder. But then they come back, as they become more capable as social enterprises. They can do more, they can take in more revenue, they can afford to take on larger loans, and be able to continue investing in their systems. And so a lot of what we're reporting, we have a lot of different data points that we're reporting on with mWater, but this is really what people want to see from the start. What was the baseline? And then what is what's the progress? And so I'd say the key message that I would like to convey is that by working with mWater, we've been able to provide rigor, accountability, and credibility for our investors, the public agency partners that become more and more important in this work, and then donors. And it's actually having this kind of third party, it's on the mWater platform, it's based around these best practices and principles on indicators and how we're monitoring and reporting. And so it kind of keeps us more honest, I would say. And it also helps others to recognize that this isn't just us, but we're part of a network of using these best practices as indicators. This is what it looks like in the mWater system. So our platform is actually the mWater system. If you want to look at our data, it looks like it's ours because there's a home page that looks like our website, but it actually takes you right into the mWater platform. So we've had success and a lot of challenges and a lot of lessons on Azure Source Capital, but we're now expanding it to 3 countries, and we will expand it to more countries. And we're learning to get more efficient and better about how we do this. So we anticipate that this will continue growing, and that's our plan, and that's what we're working towards. In part because of the success of Azure Source Capital and our literacy in sort of financial modeling, business development, and the way that we could understand and report on financing. 2 years ago, CRS was invited to be a technical lead on a program that's a debt for nature swap, essentially, but it's a debt for development swap in El Salvador, which I'll just explain very briefly that it was a refinancing of El Salvador's sovereign debt that it generated $350 million in savings in debt management for the country of El Salvador over the next 20 years. And to make this mechanism work, the country committed to using that savings to put into a conservation program. So this is the watershed restoration conservation program in El Salvador over the next 20 years. And an important piece of this program is putting in water and sanitation services with the aim of full coverage of water and sanitation services as defined in SDG 6 over the next 20 years. So we are now in the process of embedding mWater into this program and doing that in partnership with the government of El Salvador. So how do we interface what Azure has been doing, what the Somos DINEPA program is doing, into the government's own database and their own reporting on these indicators. And so, if you ask me, nearly 10 years after first approaching mWater about doing this has been worth it. It has certainly saved us effort, time, and money. This is much more cost effective for us than setting up our own platform and all the work that would have been gone into that. And mWater's constantly on the cutting edge, so we always know that it's there. And they have done some tailored tools that we're looking for specifically around financial management. I'm going to end on this one. And it's sort of these kind of lessons. How are we going to achieve these results that we're looking for and still kind of focused on SDGs, even if the time period stretches out? I still fully believe that this is what we should be looking for, is full access to improved water and sanitation services and protecting our water sources. And so how do we do that? And we need to do it through a network and ecosystem. And so that ecosystem includes the private sector, it includes the financial sector, the public sector, NGOs. Everybody has a role, and those roles get tailored to specific problems that you're trying to solve. And I would put mWater deeply in that, understanding that knowledge, the ability to be able to analyze what you're doing and improve, a constant effort towards improving, using the data that you're gathering to ask the hard questions and improve what you're doing. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Paulo. It was really interesting. Some big numbers there, especially with the Real Input program. Very exciting. Okay, so for our next presenter and panelist, I'm going to introduce Alan Hollenbach. He's technical director with World Vision. I'll tell you a little story. When we first met Alan, We had noticed when we monitor our operations around the world, and when we get a lot of users somewhere, we ask like, what's going on there? And we noticed a big uptick in users suddenly in Indonesia. And we were like, what is going on there? And it turns out it was him developing a whole monitoring framework on his own, in the USAID IU WASH program. And we happened to have someone in Indonesia at that moment, and we said, well, you got to go meet this guy. So since then, we've been much closer, and Alan has been a leader in the use of GIS for humanitarian interventions and development. And he's taken those skills that he's developed over those many years in development programs to World Vision. So we're really excited to have you tell us about your work. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Just to clarify, it was not me independently mapping everything in Indonesia. There was a lot of very, very talented and dedicated staff involved. But yeah, I got my start with mWater in Indonesia. But then in 2019 moved to World Vision, and that's what I want to talk to you a little bit about today. I want to give you a little bit of perspective from, John asked me to give some perspective from the NGO side on doing more with less. And so I would say, like many organizations, like many humanitarian organizations, World Vision, and specifically World Vision WASH, has been on a journey towards data-driven management, asking ourselves, how can we better leverage digital monitoring tools to strengthen our monitoring systems? And it is an entire monitoring system. How can we do that to boost accountability to the communities we serve, to the governments we work with, to the donors who entrust their money to World Vision? And while there's a lot that I could say about the road that we have traveled as an international NGO, allow me to provide just 3 quick snapshots from the journey along the themes of scale, integrate, and sustain. So I'll move my car to, oh, that was so much fun. I'm going to do it once more. Scale, all right. I like that. So to begin with scale, while our efforts towards data-driven management in WASH and in World Vision have taken different forms over the years, as I'm sure many organizations here have had different phases as well, I would say the current phase really began in 2021 with an intentional pivot to mWater as our go-to platform. And I'll say that what started in Zambia, and you'll see some water points popping up here, really took hold quite quickly, even much more quickly than I anticipated, across World Vision's offices around the world. We went from a handful of users in Zambia to today having more than 3,000 users across the World Vision partnership in and of itself. And just as a point of reference, we have now mapped with our governments and other local partners more than, actually, I made this slide on Thursday, and it's now over 190,000 because it changes every hour of every day as new water points, new systems are monitored and mapped by our World Vision staff around the world. So we're now up to about 190,000 just as one example. And I do want to give a shameless plug here too as well. The customized version of the app in and of itself really helped World Vision to realize or achieve scale internally by just making it easier than ever for our WASH teams around the world to collect data as they go about their jobs. Like John said, not going and getting your data sort of a one-off thing, but making it part of the daily job, infusing it into the daily workflow. Now, We're not just collecting the data, of course, but we're also using this data to understand what I call the geography of clean water. Working with our government and local civil society partners to visualize the geography of clean water in ways that are intuitive, that are immediate, and that are accessible. So early on, we recognized as we got into this and we saw this explosion of interest from Zambia on out, we said, okay, we need a bit of a home base for our digital universe. And that led to development of our global mWater hub, which is shown here, which also lives within the mWater, on the mWater server. This hub aggregates data from across all of our offices around the world every hour of every day. As water points, systems, sanitation facilities, healthcare facilities, schools are mapped, and new output and outcome surveys are submitted and approved. In that regard, we also set up some standardized indicators that help to streamline the aggregation of this data across different countries. And the result of this was real-time reporting that really helped to shorten our feedback loop and empower the teams on the ground to interpret data and learn quickly and apply decisions much more rapidly. In other words, we don't need at this point to wait until the end of the quarter or the end of the semi-annual or even the end of the annual period. These numbers will continue to update as new sites and surveys are submitted each and every day. Now, importantly, the digital data capture also introduces a whole new level of transparency to our internal monitoring systems. So if we look just for a moment at basic water services, for example, just with a couple clicks of a button, we can very, very easily get a breakdown of all of that data across the 40-plus countries that we focus on, and we can see that data by quarter and by country, of course, as well. But what's more, we can also see the details behind the numbers. And I think that was something that was really missing in our previous monitoring systems, right? We can see the details behind the numbers by tracing one little block of data in Q4 in Rwanda all the way down to that each individual water point or each individual point of service delivery, where we can confirm things like the exact location, the date that it was installed, the source type, how it's being operated and monitored, the functionality status, and the estimated number of users as well. Now, because data can also often be anti-gravity in organizations as big as World Vision. I don't know if some of you know what I mean by this, but the issue is that the data goes all the way up the chain, different offices, different levels, different decision makers, goes all the way up there to the ceiling. You can barely see it, and then it never comes back down. It stays up there. And it gets put into other types of reports, etc., and it never actually gets back to the people that collected it in the first place. And that is probably one of the single biggest challenges that we have been trying to solve as an organization over the last couple of years. So to try to fight the anti-gravity forces, we said we don't want to just have this one hub. We'll create one for every single one of our national offices so that they can use it independently with their government partners, with their civil society stakeholders, that they can help and share this data directly so that it does not disappear into the black abyss of the spreadsheets, of the hard drives, of the PDF files, which, by the way, stands for permanent data freeze. If you didn't realize that, PDF is actually a permanent data freeze because once data goes in, it never comes back out of a PDF, like ever. You can't even copy and paste it. You ever tried to do that? Copy and paste it into an Excel spreadsheet? Doesn't work. We don't do PDFs anymore. We don't want to anymore. So these hubs are designed for the data to be used by our WASH teams to plan, design, and monitor our WASH programs. So for example, a staff member will just choose one hub in Ghana, for example. They can sit with a government planning officer in, let's say, Agortime district, and they can briefly discuss, say, potentially underserved or unserved communities based on the population data and the location and functionality status that we are seeing on the map. Importantly, the staff member can then even share a link back to that government officer after the meeting so that as new data is added, we're working off not just the same page, we're working off the same map. And that is one of the most important factors when we think about coordination and collaboration, working off the same map. This, I believe, is what it looks like to at least start to overcome those anti-gravity forces. And they are strong forces because I fight them every single day. I'm sure many in this room do as well. My second point, integrate. Second snapshot from the journey. Integration is a well-worn phrase. I really hesitated to use it in this presentation, but all that to say that data-driven management can really help us better visualize integration and facilitate integration. It reminds us that we work in places, not sectors. We work in places, not sectors. I've been to a lot of places with World Vision. I am yet to physically visit the WASH sector. I don't know where it is. Someone could tell me. Integration is at the forefront of our new World Vision 5-year Global WASH business plan, which just launched, by the way, just a couple of weeks ago. The theme of that business plan for the next 5 years, 2026 to 2030, is mapping the blue thread, emphasizing how water is the blue thread of integration, that it connects people, places, progress. And it is no overstatement to say that digital data is at the heart of our new business plan. It is helping World Vision and its partners to visualize the blue thread connections in so many new ways. Just one example from Ghana. We'll zoom in to Ghana, and then we'll specifically zoom in to the north. This is the community of Tubong in northeastern Ghana. It's an inherently vulnerable area. It is one of the poorest and driest parts of Ghana. Many of the households rely on subsistence agriculture. World Vision has been working in Tubong for a number of years across a host of different activities, one of which was the Tubong water supply system, which serves about 300 households, serves the primary school, serves the local market as well. And we're already starting to see that integration even in this map. Incidentally, if you want a really good presentation, always make sure you include a map. Can't have a good presentation without a map. Given the water security challenges here, though, we've recently sort of traced the blue thread into areas of food security and livelihoods, not to mention environmental stewardship. So I just want to zoom in for a moment, a little bit closer, and we can see the town center here, including the school and marketplace that are served by that water system. But I want to shift to the north to a community garden and a nearby forestry site. So right here, we can see the view from the southernmost point, the southernmost water point of that system before we proceed down to the main garden area. This is the solar array that actually that is powering the system. But this is what I really want to show right here. This is a snapshot from the data within mWater itself. And it might be hard to see there at the bottom of the screen, but there's a link between the water supply system and that community garden that allows community members like this like this gentleman and like these ladies to grow crops year round. So there's a physical link within our mWater data set that takes something that on the face of it might appear separate, a water supply system, and then over here a community garden, and it explicitly links them together. And it enables us down the road then to start to query things like, well, how many hectares of community gardens or agriculture are actually depending on these types of water supply systems? And you start to see the blue thread come alive in really, really vivid ways, simply because we're better connecting the agriculture and the business side to the water side. My final point, just on sustain, and this is probably my favorite because it's my most recent as well, on sustainable service delivery. And my third snapshot also comes from Ghana. So let me just briefly go down to the community of Atwidie, which I was in just a couple of weeks ago. Sustain. So in partnership with Hilton, World Vision supported the Atwidie small town water system in 2021. We see here just some of the 56 assets. John mentioned the asset systems. The 56 assets that are mapped in mWater. And they include the water source, they include a chlorinator, the main tank, they include a illustrative household tap and meter. Now, World Vision is working with the district right at the moment to professionalize the management of this and 5 other small town water systems, also in partnership with Hilton, by the way. Just this past week, we helped the government's contracted local operator establish their own organization within mWater. We then helped them set up a custom version of the mWater application. And we are now helping them to set up their customer accounts, their billing system. And importantly, because we're both organizations within the mWater system, I was able, with a couple clicks of a button, to take all of these assets that World Vision had mapped over the last couple of years and transfer them right over to the operator. Because they are the default operator, not World Vision. They are the default operator. And so now that is sitting under our new operator, and we are working with them remotely to get this billing, accounting, and overall a management system up and running. We're also helping them digitize their daily, weekly, and monthly operator surveys so that somebody who is actually living in this community can fill out those surveys, take pictures of the meters each day, send any technical issues back to their main office so that somebody doesn't have to drive all the way out here. And by the way, when you can't see it in the picture, but it's quite a hill right there. When it's raining hard, it is really hard to get up that hill. They don't have to send somebody out at any point. They can send somebody out when there's a specific issue and they know what they need to fix because they've already seen a picture of it and evidence of what parts need to be replaced. That is gaining efficiencies, and I believe that is what data-driven management looks like. On a final note, as we go and we set up this rural water enterprise, its registry, the meters, customers, and accounts, that is all also feeding into our next sort of phase, which is also part of our business plan, which is the Blue Thread Global Water Fund. And this is where we are now starting to bring in repayable financing. In order to help systems like Atwidie not only operate but expand beyond their current capacity. This is a central part of our new business plan, and we're hoping to use it to leverage philanthropic resources to sustain and expand water services. But to be very, very clear here, debt financing, which you heard Paul talking about as well. Debt financing, loans, it requires data. It requires data. with the Global Water Fund, there's a credit committee. The annoying things about credit committees is that they want to see cash flows. They want to see the data that is flowing in. They want to understand how much something costs. They want to see that they might actually get paid back. So let's see your cash flows and let's see your balance sheets. All of that requires data. At the moment, Atelier doesn't have that data. In 6 months and a year, they will have that data, and we can then turn that around into financing to expand that system. Those are my 3 snapshots. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. Wow, I wish mWater could make all those things that you just saw. Alan has a real talent for visualization and making things visual. That's awesome. Okay, so for our last speaker, and then we'll move to the panel of questions, I'd like to introduce Susan Dundon. She's a director at the Osprey Foundation. One of the interesting things about Susan is she's worked outside of the WASH sector and came back. She was previously director of young adults and working families with the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation, working with local communities in the United States. And fortunately for us, she's come back to reprise her role as a WASH expert. So I'm really glad to have you.
Thank you, John. Leave it to the funder to be the least prepared. So I have no slides, and I do have some notes. But really, I just wanted to use this time and this invitation to share a little bit about how funders think about data, not only for our own use, and also just from the sector perspective. So clearly, the sort of the most granular, basic way that funders use data is the data that you monitor and report to us. It helps us feel good about our impact. We read about that and say, wow, yeah, we made the right decision. And it's really important for us to have that data in the reporting because it helps us make the case to the people who decide to make the investments. But more important than that, I think I certainly, and I think my colleagues in the funding community do this as well. We use that data to inform our own strategies, right? So I didn't plan this example, but it's the one I'm going to use. When I first one of the first assignments that I had when I came to Osprey was, Bill Clark. He invested in the Azores Capital. He invested some concessional capital for the loan fund, and we got a letter, and the letter said the next tranche of funding is due. So he sends it to me, and he says, before I send this money, you want to look into this report? Attaches the report. And there's all this data in the report about this loan capital, and there's all these slides about how some of the water service providers had moved from A to D, and I'm trying to be impressive, and I'm a new employee, and I got my Excel spreadsheet out and making all these comparisons between the 30 water service providers that actually got loans and the 300 water service providers that were part of the program and that somehow were touched by the program. And that was clear from the data that I had received and dug into, that they also had improvements, but it wasn't just because they got a loan, something else was happening. And so as I dug into it more and thought about it, I said, this is as much a TA program as it is a loan program, right? And one of the things I think we really need to do is we need to quantify the value of how much it costs to provide that TA, because it seemed clear to me that as an investor in the loan fund, we actually were not contributing to the TA, which was a big part of what made the loan fund actually work. And there were other positive outcomes from all the TA that was, being provided along the way, but that, maybe wasn't the terminal end of that improvement wasn't a loan, but it was something else. And so really looking into that data helped me sort of make a case that wow, let's really, how can we fortify this, right? How can we scale this model? And all of that data that was provided to me by CRS and some more that I asked for along the way, we now have sort of a multi-funder working group looking at how are we going to fund this TA, and how are we going to tell the story. It's much more broader than just, can we get a water service provider loan ready so that they can take capital to make improvements? It's a lot of other things too. And certainly for me, that would not have happened had I not looked at the data. But I beyond just sort of reassuring you all that funders look at your reports and the data matters to us, the revelations that I might have at my desk. I think what is more important, certainly to me, and I think definitely to the Osprey Foundation, and it's what I've heard a lot of people talking about at the conference, is the use of data for decision making. And this is the type of data that, you know, Paul and World Vision is collecting, and that many of the organizations that, you know, we know and support, and others. This type of data is critical for system strengthening. At Osprey, system strengthening is sort of a core to our brand. Our North Star is sustainable services, right? So we want safe, dignified, affordable, sustainable wash services. And that is our definition of success. And we think there are 3 ways to do that. There are 3 ways to strengthen systems. One is sort of government-led, area-wide approaches. Another is market and results-based approaches. And the third is a combination of those 2 things. And essentially data, and a lot of it, is required for all 3 of those things, right? And I'll explain a little bit the kinds of data that I think is important across all 3, the kind that I see our grantees reporting. They need to have resources to gather in order to succeed in this. You know, on the district level, sort of, you know, area-wide approaches, you need to do water master plans, you need to do financing strategies, you need to professionalize O&M. Like those things, they're all connected. They're all building blocks. And without the data that says, well, this is actually where we don't have coverage, this is actually where we don't have money, this is where actually the kind of systems that would be most efficient and affordable in those places, I think that's, you know, really, if you don't have that, you don't have data for decision making. It's going to be really hard to actually make a comprehensive district level plan to do that. I think that another thing that I've heard in this conference, and I think this work that mWater and others have done, is really working with national governments on national MIS systems. And I think that helps not just the governments, but everybody who's working in concert with them to try to improve sustainability and access. We heard our representative from the One Wash National Program yesterday actually say right out loud, they don't have it. They don't have it for the wash sector, but they really need it. So he talked about an EMIS system in Ethiopia. He talked about an HMIS system for education and health, but not a WASH MIS system, and what a real gap that was for them. And this is one of the countries, at least that I hear all the time, you know, an example of this is the way it should be done, also saying like one of the biggest things we're missing is a national MIS system. I think, you know, that would, you know, a national MIS system where there would be some key KPIs that the government could track and that everybody could report into. One of the things that I'm really excited about also in that vein is just sort of indicator libraries, right? This kind of maybe nerdy and lame, but you know, if there were indicator libraries and we could commonly, you know, across the world have you know, a common standard for getting, you know, data on indicators, and that would be comparable. You know, I think that's something that's missing and would be super powerful as a way of just data for decision making. At Osprey, we're working with you know, WHO, and WHO is working with UNICEF and World Bank and many of you in the room around system strengthening indicators. Those are, if they don't get uploaded into a system and people can easily collect them, it's not really going to help us very much. So I think having them is one thing, operationalizing them and executing them is another. Another area that the Osprey Foundation and many of our colleagues on the Wash Funders group are big fans of is results-based or market-based approaches. And these are truly data-driven, right? So you clearly can't get results-based financing without data. So you know, you need to be able to report on your reliability. You need to be able to report on revenue, on volume, and that data needs to be independently verified. So it actually has to be good for you to be able to access that kind of funding. We're seeing more and more of this. I think not just in water. Obviously, Uptime has had great success with this, but you know, some of our grantees like soil and sanitation and Fresh Life in Kenya, looking to establish a strong platform of data so that they can access results-based funding. And you know, I think right now that much of that funding is philanthropic, but like the ultimate holy grail for that is government, right? That the government is paying for poor results. And I think the data is what is needed for us to convince governments, finance ministers that this is a good use of their of their money. So I think, you know, that's proxy for me, for a functioning system, is if, you know, you can report reliability, revenue, volume, you know, you can get a results-based functioning. You do have a functioning system in that case. And I just want to give this example. I was in Malawi in May, and I had, like, you know, I got there a day earlier than everybody else, and I decided I wasn't just going to sit in my hotel room. Maybe somebody would let me visit them. And so I said, I sent an email, totally impromptu, and I went to visit a small water service provider. And they were, you know, working in rural areas outside Lilongwe. They did not know me. I didn't really know them. And I just wanted to see, you know, how it worked. And they were very gracious and showing me around. So I go to their office, and again, it's a local, small water service provider that's fixing hand pumps. They started with like 50. When I was there, they were at 250, and they were getting to 500. And sort of waiting in the you know, waiting room, or the lobby part of their little tiny, that's an exaggeration of what it was, but the front room of where I was, and the executive director is like in a meeting, and he's saying, well, you know, can you just sit with this, my colleague here, Sam? And I said, oh yeah, Sam, you know, how are you, blah, blah, blah. We're just trying to, you know, shooting the shit. And he says, oh, do you want to see our data on what we're doing here? And I was like, oh yeah, I'll see your data. And so he opens up his computer, and he is literally showing me, like, every single, like, when I said revenue, reliability, volume, like, he's got this dashboard, and it's all this information, and this is what will happen if we get this many more, you know, water points. And it was just like an unbelievable torrent of very understandable data. And so I look at him, and I was like, oh, you must know Annie and John. And he's like, Annie and John? I was like, who are Annie and John? And I'm like, well, it looks like you're using mWater. He's like, yeah. And I was like, well, how did you do this? And he said, oh, I go on YouTube, and I teach myself everything, right? And this is an organization that truly, you know, actually was operating professional operations and maintenance as a result of having access to mWater and being able to figure it out themselves. So then they say, okay, well, I said, well, you know, I'm in the office, and I said, can you take me to the field? I'd really like to see something in the field. Again, impromptu. So I get in there, and it turns out there's a guy fixing the hand pump, and he's got his, you know, handheld device there. He's checking everything he's doing, and at the same time, the guy who's showing me the system is like, when we go back, we'll be able to see everything you did, right? Like, he's literally real time putting this data in. I mean, this is like the democratization of data, right? Like, World Vision can have access, so can the guy, like, who's in the middle of Rwanda figuring it out for himself. And I just, you know, really was impressed by that. And it just sort of in conclusion, like John said, you know, I had an 8-year sabbatical, I guess I would say, from the wash sector. And, you know, 8 years ago, 2015 when I left, you know, it was sort of like a revelation to map your water points and put it online, right? And to come to see the sector now and see how, you know, data is being used for decision making. Data is really driving continuous improvement, that without data, you know, it's helping us with the efficiencies of resources. I hope that will also help us with the how of systems change, right? It's really, I don't see a way that we can do more with less if we don't do more with less with data. And again, I just impressed with, as a sort of relative newbie back in the sector, with this idea of a digital public good. And I also have a really strong personal feeling that, you know, this kind of data, these kind of platforms are now kind of part of the ecosystem infrastructure of the WASH sector. We don't really have that many advantages in WASH, you know, like, you know, it's a low margin business. It's, you know, it's just not something that's like so exciting for people to get into. I actually think that data could be the differentiator for us, right? I really think it could be the kind of thing that might give us the edge. And I think the fact that, like, a guy in Malawi who has never heard of, like, literally anything, and the guy who's running, you know, the WASH programming for the biggest NGO are both using the same data. They both have the same ability to use that data to make decisions. You know, I feel like we really need to drive this advantage, like, as much as we possibly can in a way to do more with less. So that's all for me.
I'm going to invite you to stay up here because we're going to bring the panelists up. And thanks for all of you for your presentations. We want to give time for questions. There's questions from the audience. We also have probably some online questions. So we'll start. I think we'll start with you guys. Who wants to go first? Yeah, go ahead. And please tell us who you're directing it to, or if it's generally to the entire panel.
Yeah,
as
okay.
well.
Thank you. It was a nice presentation. I usually focus to the World Vision presentation, which is very nice. Just for better understanding, you have shown us a map, which is in different parts of the country. Did you map only the water point of World Vision or other ones? And how your collaboration looks like with the government at different levels so that the government can benefit to maximize out of that. And the second one is, for instance, you have a lot of more than 100,000 across the world. If a scheme is mapped into your system a couple of years ago, how your updating system looks like. For instance, the system is not functional in 2022 and how if it is not functional now. And third one is in terms of being an open source, there's a question of security. How the system is secured in a way that someone can get into the system, manipulate the data, and also affect the decision system. Thank you.
Okay, 3 questions. I think the first one is for Alan, but then maybe we can all handle other ones. But yeah.
Yeah, let me take the first one, which I believe was when we're mapping systems. Is it only World Vision or is it others as well? It's absolutely others as well. It really depends on the purpose, but in many cases we find ourselves working with government to do an area-wide assessment, and so we are mapping all water points and all water systems, no matter who supported it, because that is sort of one of our first steps to what we call universal service coverage, is understanding what's there, who the service providers are, what's functioning and what's not functioning, and then looking at the population data to understand where do we have served communities, where do we have unserved communities, or potentially underserved communities. So it's definitely both. It just depends sort of on what is the unique focus of that specific country or that specific initiative. But you saw the explosion in Zambia at the very, very beginning that sort of got everything going. Zambia had embarked on a very ambitious program across 30 different operational areas to understand coverage levels, and that was mapping everything that was there, including if people were getting their water from the river, we wanted to know about it. If it was a pond, they mapped that too. And so it was really everything to get the fullest, most accurate picture of the geography of clean water.
I think I'll just take the question about security, just because we deal with this every single time. It's the first and last question that we get asked when we're working with a government or government agency or a utility. Very important. For us, the answer is that you control your data. We don't commercialize the data. We don't use it for anything else. And you decide, as a government entity or as an individual user, what's available, what's public, and what's not. And you can make your data public for people to see and use in their own monitoring efforts, but not change. So that's a kind of a middle level that we offer for data security, where you can collect your data, you control it, but everybody else can see it, for example, for public infrastructure. But we also, fundamentally leave that decision up to the data owner. And if we work with the government and they're not comfortable sharing data, we'll often keep the data private until they are. And we find often over time, the government may become more comfortable when they see how the data is being used and how much more it could be used by, if it was more accessible. But yeah, I think the answer for us is always, it's up to the user. A great question. Yeah. So any more questions from the audience? Yes.
My name is Paul, the lead of WASH program in Sudan. One, I want to thank the team and especially the founders of mWater. From Sudan context, I can say it was very difficult, especially in the proposed developments, to confirm to our donors how shall we be able to report, especially where you're in a fragile context. The issue of reporting, the issue of monitoring, the issue of providing data. But we're able to demonstrate how we are able to work with the last mile staff in the field to provide data that we can validate and informs decision making. And I'm happy this year as we closed our financial year, our portfolio for WASH program had grown from about 2 million to $9 million because of the trust we've been able to demonstrate to most of our donors that actually we can even implement in a context that is so fragile and so limiting. So thank you so much. So my question is, especially to you, John, in this room we have scientists and academia. With all this information collected across the globe, how can we use then mWater data to visualize based on its capabilities to support research, especially on groundwater performance and predicting solutions for environmental related disasters? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we're very interested in that problem as well, and resilience and hazard mapping and things like that are going to be coming into the platform soon. But maybe Paul, that would be a question I could field to you, because you're working now on a watershed level project that's involving both flood risk and trying to reduce the environmental hazards to the entire basin. So do you think you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, to be quite honest, I didn't know that mWater was going to do that. So that we've created a multi-partner platform for this large program, watershed program, including government and different government agencies, ministries. It's a monitoring, reporting, and verification platform, and we're developing that. And so now I was writing down those notes. So mWater is going to be in this space. So it sounds really interesting, and if it has the same rigor that the water and sanitation data have, then I think it becomes an interesting opportunity.
I think maybe the one thing I would add is, as we are thinking about water resource management, it's a little bit different than water and sanitation, because that's infrastructure that's owned by a government entity or an asset owner or a private sector company. And when we're talking about watersheds and water bodies and aquifers, those are those are natural features that have according to some the rights of their own to exist, and that's a whole different category. So we're thinking about ways that we can do shared monitoring of those things like watersheds and basins without having somebody be in charge of it, but collaborate together. And that's an easier said than done thing in terms of a database, but we're thinking about that more along the lines of like an open access database like Wikipedia or something, and less like an asset management system. But it's going to be something we're thinking about a lot next year. So keep your ears open. Okay. Yeah. Andrew.
Hey everyone. I think my question is for Alan. So I'm really interested in this, the base of the iceberg bit, especially when we think around World Vision, implementing mWater at scale, the training and sort of the data cleaning, the data integrity. What kind of processes, systems have you had to put in place? What kind of challenges have you faced with that, and what sort of like lessons would you have for all of us as we're thinking about trying to implement these kind of systems, digitized systems at scale, which I know digital data helps us to do more with less, but it's not more with nothing. Like we still have to invest in these sort of like the bottom of the iceberg systems. So, thanks.
So World Vision is a big iceberg. You have a lot of country programs, so maybe share about that.
It is a big iceberg, for sure. Wow, that could be an all-afternoon session in and of itself, for sure. I think what I would say is, number one, for us, what has been the most successful, I believe, is showing the value to the individual users and letting them take it from there. You know, let me just give you an example. So I do trainings all the time, and training, capacity building is obviously a huge part of this. And the technology, as everyone in this room knows, the technology is the easy part, right? And mWater makes it even easier than most, which is why we love to use it. But that's the easy part. The hard part is getting the momentum internally, and then the training and the capacity building. And it is fighting the anti-gravity forces, because they just suck you down every single day. And what I have found is, again and again and again, is that if I can get a field level user to sit down and for one moment take the data that they've collected, because many times it's the first time they've ever done this, to take the data that they've collected and actually make something out of it and see it in a whole new way, it transforms them in a way that is really, really exciting. And I still make this mistake where I'm like, okay, when I'm doing a training, I got to get through this. I got to get through the material. We got to get through all the portal. We got to get through this, X, Y, and Z. And then I'm like, oh, are we going to have time at the end of this for people to, you know, experiment and make their first dashboard? Well, we'll see. Such a mistake when I do that. Such a mistake. And I just, in this last training in Ghana, one of the guys said, no, let's put it in there. Let's put it in there in the end. We know it's late. It's the last session, but let's still do it. I said, okay. To see the faces of our staff and the people that have been asked to send data up the chain for 10 or 20 years, to actually take it and put it into a map in their little sub-district, their unique corner of the earth, and watch their face sort of light up, like that's it. That's it. Because I know that from that standpoint, from that point on, that individual they're a new mWater champion. And yes, we get t-shirts. T-shirts help too. You know that doesn't hurt, throw in a good shirt.
Saw your shirt.
But that is just one of the lessons that I keep coming back to again and again and again. And I know it sounds a little bit trite, but when you're working at scale, man, you got to fight the gravity, you got to fight the anti-gravity forces, and you got to get down to the individual champions on the ground, so that feedback loop. Yes, they can still send data up the chain, but that feedback loop is, I go out, like we just heard in terms of that hand pump, right? They go out, they do something, they fix it, they come back, and they see it right away. That's the magic. That's the magic, and that's where I have seen again and again the ability to then gain the momentum that then goes to scale.
I wanted to also throw this to Susan, because you talked about Osprey's, emphasis on system strengthening and building professionalization in the sector. What's the viewpoint of donors in terms of how can we scale up that capacity faster? Because it obviously is a limiting factor in a lot of organizations.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that the incentives in some ways are part of the scale, right? That the incentives to be able to access results-based financing when it's there, whether it's philanthropic capital or public capital. You know, that example in Malawi, I think part of what made them build the system so robust was because they were building in this idea that they would want to qualify for results-based funding. And so they sort of said, this is what we need to build it this strong. We need to be using this data in this way. And so I think understanding how important that is to unlock finance, whether it's philanthropic, that's got to be a huge incentive and driver.
I think that's a great point to close on. I'm so sorry that we haven't had more time for questions, but we are available here, and the panelists will be out here during the break. So we really invite you to come up and ask us the hard questions that maybe you didn't want to ask in front of everybody else, but you want to ask us. We're here to answer them. And thank you very much for coming to the session, and we're really grateful for your time. Thank you. And thank you to our panelists.
I'm sitting there. I let you. I'm sitting there.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good. Thank you.